here's Brody Brazil.
Well, here we are at the end of another Major League Baseball regular season. But was there anything regular about it? Honestly, there was not. And for me to even say these words, right, for that to actually come out of my mouth right now, I definitely could not have guaranteed that 3-4 months ago. And we were thinking about what baseball would look like through a pandemic. 60 games in 66 days, the commitment by everybody to get this done was amazing, was incredible. Evolving through testing, protocols, procedures, travel, stadium operations, making the games different, 7-inning doubleheaders, as well as starting extra innings with runners on second base, a DH in the National League. The commitment by everybody to get this done. And for these players and coaches and staff members to go through seasons and make the sacrifice of not seeing their families to keep them safe. I'm just telling you here, the commitment you've seen on television is only a small tip of the iceberg. And so I give a lot of credit to everybody involved who planned out this baseball season, but more importantly, to all the people who actually executed on it properly. And it was not perfect by any means. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we'll talk about that in just a second. But there was even also the possibility of not having baseball this summer because of labor issues. Do you remember that? It seems so far-fetched right now, but the players wanted more games. Owners wanted less games. They couldn't agree if it was 40 or 100 or 80 or 50 or 60 that they ultimately didn't even agree on. Commissioner Rob Manfred had to basically establish this is what we're doing. Even though two sides can't agree, here's what we're going to proceed with. So many dominoes had to fall the right way for this baseball season to even happen at all. And I know we are a couple months removed from all of that. And I know we're on the news cycle where we forget things so quickly, but I definitely want to bring it back to that right now. It's important to remember that none of this was guaranteed. It's also interesting to think about baseball being the first league to completely start and conclude a regular season during the pandemic. Now, it definitely wasn't a full season. I mean, 60 versus the normal 162, but everybody else approached it a different way. The National Basketball Association, National Hockey League, Major League Soccer, they already had their seasons underway. So they were trying to finish off a playoff structure. Plus, all three of those leagues went into their respective bubbles. So the Major League Baseball situation, they had more of a daunting task in all of this. Not only starting from scratch, but also realizing that they could not properly exist in a bubble. And they had to do it a completely different way. And it wouldn't have worked for a number of reasons. I've already explained this, but I mean, just to recap, players would have had to have gone into a bubble for four plus months. Playing every day is also an issue with that. And you can't have 6 baseball teams playing 3 games at one stadium per day. The facilities and batting practice and batting cages and clubhouses, I mean, it's just nothing is set up for that. So the bubble was a nice idea at first. I just don't think that was realistic. Even if it were in Arizona or in Florida, too many sites, too many hotels, too much confusion. Actually separating Major League Baseball into a West, a Central, and an East, and keeping these teams farther apart may have somehow worked in their favor as we go back and study this someday. But anyway, baseball did it a different way, and they executed pretty well. Wasn't perfect. There were some COVID scares. And people asked at the very beginning of all this, like, what are even the chances of 60 games happening start to finish? I didn't know. I had a tough time putting a percentage on it. The one thing I did say from the very get-go was that we would know about the halfway point if baseball could get a season in. You'll kind of understand the themes and the trends by then. And at that midway point, teams like the Cardinals and Marlins, they had already been ravaged, missing weeks worth of games, tons of doubleheaders now to make up. So again, it was not easy at the halfway point, but I think we could see there were enough adaptations and maybe even mindset changes of people taking this seriously to get a season done. And even at that halfway point, a little after that, for a team like the A's, they had a COVID scare. And fortunately, it was nothing more than a scare. And it's not a disrespect to the one individual who tested positive, but fortunately, so many other players, even without knowing any positives had taken place, they were all taking the proper precautions so that one player's positive didn't spread to anybody else. And I think that's interesting this season. We have seen it spread internally with a team, but what we didn't see, and what was honestly a legitimate fear going into this year, is that teams could spread it from one to another. Didn't seem like that ever was the case here in 2020. Some teams were shut down for more than a week, like I mentioned. And it's also interesting to see all the teams, well, most of them that went through this adversity, like the Marlins, like the Cardinals, like the Reds, like the Oakland A's. They're all in the playoffs. They all overcame that. It's interesting. I know the plan for the playoffs is to tighten down even more. I mean, I'm looking forward to postseason baseball just in general. But I also think it's a great move to have neutral sites after the wild card round. Kind of creating a soft bubble where you're not going to have travel with these two teams. You're going to have them in contained hotel environments. The soft bubble is definitely going to keep more people safe during these next critical months of the fall. And I also think from, the lesser important side of it, it's going to ensure that there are no delays or stoppages, or it's going to minimize having any kind of hiccups where games would not be played. And you just cannot have that when you're trying to sequence out playoff baseball between two leagues and multiple series. All right, so even looking past the playoffs that we're about to witness next season, and I realize we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but spring training and the next regular season, they're already on the calendar. Now, I've learned during these times that you cannot assume anything either way. You just don't know how our country and this situation is going to trend. You have an idea, but predictions have been wrong both ways over the last 6+ months. So it's hard to project without assuming anything, but I'm very curious to see how our country's timeline goes in these next couple months of 2020 and in the first couple months of 21. Because I'll tell you right now, even if that next season gets started on time, which I think would be a best case scenario for baseball, spring training in February and then the season beginning in April, even if that does happen, there is no chance that early next year feels normal. Now, there may be a lot of steps in the right direction, hopefully including a vaccine, hopefully including less risk for people, more knowledge of the situation, a better handle on everything. I just think it's important to right now kind of understand what's down the road and what's being planned out, to not think it's set in stone, but to also understand that if we can get to that, it would obviously mean there have been some good developments for mankind.